Welcome, everyone. We're delighted that you have joined us to talk about and learn about the Transitioning Away from Fossil Fuels conference in Santa Marta, Colombia. My name is Ted Jackson, and it's my honor to serve as the chair of the Group of 78 foreign policy nonprofit based in Ottawa. We have an exciting topic to discuss today and a superb panel of speakers whom I will introduce shortly. This webinar is being recorded and the recording will be available very soon this week. First, though, I'd like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people, who have lived here for thousands of years at this gathering point on the confluence of three rivers. We recognize the damage perpetrated on this land and its original peoples by our colonial institutions. As a foreign policy nonprofit, we support the implementation of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. The Group of 78 has much to learn and much to do in integrating Indigenous knowledge and perspectives into our work and in working in partnership as an effective ally with Indigenous organizations. Miigwech. The Santa Marta Conference is to be held at the end of April in the port city Santa Marta, Colombia, on the transitioning away from oil and gas and coal. And it's going to bring together a range of countries, including Australia and Mexico, two petrostates, European nations, small island states, and they will engage with civil society, with Indigenous organizations, businesses, and researchers in developing countries to develop collective implementation plans, not just to talk about it, but to develop action plans, and particularly on three themes, and we'll talk about this later in the webinar, but one is to reduce the economic dependence on fossil fuels. Another is to transform or reshape energy supply and demand. And the third area is to increase international cooperation because it's going to take a lot of collective work together. All of this will be coordinated by the two host countries, Colombia and the Netherlands. And I must say that the Group of 78 is impressed by this ambitious plurilateral initiative, strongly believes that Canada should fully support the Santa Marta Conference and should be represented there at the highest level by our government and other Canadian organizations. To get started, though, we have a very short exercise for online participants. I'd like to turn to Maude Stephanie, our executive assistant, to walk us through this exercise. It's quite quick, but it's a way for participants to weigh in on what they want to learn today. So Maude, can I ask you to walk us through the word cloud exercise?
Absolutely. So you will find on your screen, just a second here, oops, oh, figures. You will find a question on your screen. Oh, okay, maybe not right this second. I will be posting it in just a moment. We are asking you in the chat to use one word or a short phrase about what you want to learn today about the Santa Marta Conference. Give me a moment, I'll be putting that up on the screen and you can interact with that. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. All right, let me tell you about our panel today. I'm going to introduce them briefly. They have impressive bios in the online webinar notes, but we are so grateful for the time of all of you. His Excellency Carlos Morales, Ambassador of the Republic of Colombia to Canada. Ambassador Morales has held senior diplomatic posts at the United Nations, United States, Israel, Japan, as well as executive positions in Colombia's Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Bogota. Bienvenido, Ambassador. Welcome. Her Excellency Margriet Vonno, Ambassador of the Kingdom of the Netherlands to Canada. Ambassador Vonno has served as Inspector in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and as Ambassador to Singapore and Brunei, and Director in the Ministry of Infrastructure and Environment. Welcome to you, Ambassador. So glad you're here. Next, Julianna is a policy expert on climate change, biodiversity, ozone, and sustainable development cooperation. She is nature lead for the European Climate Foundation and has served as advisor to Colombia's Ministry of Environment and as Environmental Affairs Coordinator in its Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Bogota. Welcome, Laura. Our fourth speaker is Bastiaan Hassing. I'll introduce him, but he will join us a bit later. He's head of the International Climate Policy Unit at the Dutch Ministry of Economic Affairs and Climate Policy, which, by the way, is a very interesting name and concept for a ministry, and has served as Dutch head of the delegation to the United Nations framework on climate change, and also as climate and environment attaché to the European Union. We will welcome him when he joins us. Laura and Bastiaan are working together in preparations for the Santa Marta Conference. So this is people who are working on this issue in real time. Our fifth speaker is Susan Tanner. Susan is the vice chair of the group of 78 and chair of our Climate Change and Environment Working Group. She's one of Canada's leading advocates for climate action and also for women's rights. She's been involved in international climate negotiations, including award-winning work on the Montreal Protocol. Bienvenue, Susan. All right, for the next section, and thank you all for doing this once more. For the next section here in this webinar, I'd like to turn to the ambassadors and ask you to get us started with some opening statements on the background, the policy basis, the objectives and priorities and expectations of the Santa Marta Conference that you have, your country has, and your country's representation and role at the event. So let me turn now to His Excellency Carlos Morales. Ambassador, would you please take the floor?
Thank you very much. Good morning, Ambassador Margriet Vonno, Dr. Edward Jackson, panelists, distinguished panelists, and friends. I would like to talk to you about something that several countries believe is one of the most urgent conversations of our time, and more importantly, about a concrete opportunity to move that conversation forward. Colombia and the Netherlands are co-hosting the first conference on transitioning away from fossil fuels, taking place in Santa Marta, Colombia from April 24 to 29 this year. And today, we would like to share with you what that means and why it matters. Why this conference and why now? At COP28, the world reached a landmark agreement. Countries must begin transitioning away from fossil fuels in a way that is just, orderly, and equitable for everyone. These fuels are responsible for roughly 75% of the world's greenhouse gas emissions. The science is unambiguous, and yet, despite that agreement, investment in fossil fuel production continues to rise. Governments around the world are on a track to produce more than twice the amount of fossil fuels by 2030 than what is comparable with safe levels of global warming. We are, in a very real sense, moving in the wrong direction. This sits within an even broader challenge that scientists call the triple planetary crisis: climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution. Three crises that are deeply connected and that demand coordinated action. The question is no longer whether we need to transition, it's how. And that's exactly the gap this conference is designed to fill. What makes Santa Marta different? There is no dedicated global space for countries and stakeholders to jointly address the economic, fiscal, legal, and social transformation needed for a real energy transition. Santa Marta fills that gap. It's not a venue for theory, but for practical cooperation, designed to complement, not replace, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Its purpose is to bring together a coalition of willing partners, governments, cities, indigenous peoples, workers, academia, civil society, and the private sector to define concrete, realistic steps for moving away from fossil fuels tailored to each country's circumstances. By the end of the conference, we aim to have a committed coalition advancing those pathways, a follow-up process grounded in the best science, and a co-host report that fits directly into the COP30 roadmap. 3 pillars of discussion. The conference is organized around challenges which capture the real complexity of this transition. Pillar 1, overcoming economic dependence. The first challenge is shifting economies away from fossil fuels without harming the people and governments that rely on them. This is especially difficult for emerging economies with high debt. Pillar 1 seeks to ensure energy security, protect livelihoods, and build new economic models that don't repeat past extractive patterns. Pillar 2, transforming supply and demand. It addresses the mechanics of the transition, changing how we produce and consume energy, and ensuring clean options are accessible to all. This includes developing cleaner transport, industry, and household energy, planning the phase-out of fossil fuel production, including new exploration, and shifting subsidies from fossil fuels to clean investments through policy choices for millions of people. Pillar 3, international cooperation and legal barriers. This one tackles international rules that can hinder climate action. A central issue is Investor-State Dispute Settlement, ISDS, which allows foreign investors to sue governments over policies that affected profits, including actions like closing coal plants or stopping new oil exploration. Santa Marta will examine how to remove those legal obstacles so governments can act on climate without facing massive penalties. What is the format and the participation of the conference? The conference runs in 2 phases. From April 24 to 27, Santa Marta will host stakeholder-led dialogues organized by the participants themselves. This will bring together subnational governments, academia, civil society, indigenous people, and people African descent, workers' union, the private sector, parliamentarians, and a people's assembly. Those dialogues then feed directly into the high-level segment on April 28 and 29th, where ministers will meet alongside selected representatives from each stakeholder group to consolidate the solutions and pathways identified throughout the week. Our perspective. For Colombia, this initiative reflects our own national experience. Our communities need new economic opportunities, social protection, education, green jobs, and respect for their territorial rights. These insights have shaped Colombia's just transition roadmap. Our electricity mix is already largely clean, mainly based on hydropower, and we are expanding solar, onshore and offshore wind, geothermal, biomass, and storage of reduced vulnerability to climate variability phenomena like El Niño. We are also advancing community energy models that allow local communities to become producers and co-owners of renewable power. And in green hydrogen, Colombia's natural advantages give us a strong competitive potential. We are building the regulation, infrastructure, and industrial links to turn that into the quality jobs and real economic opportunity. What we expect from Santa Marta, what we expect to deliver, four things. First, realistic, science-based, and fair pathways, not declarations, but actionable steps. Second, a strong focus on financial fairness, addressing fiscal dependence, debt burdens, at the cost of capital that makes the transition harder for developing nations. Third, concrete solutions to legal barriers like ISDS so that climate ambition is not punished by international trade rules. And fourth, the launch of a coalition of the willing and the announcement of a second conference to maintain momentum all the way to COP30. Colombia and the Netherlands are inviting all partners to join us in Santa Marta, one of the best spots in the Caribbean coast of Colombia, to help shape a transition that is fair, feasible, and grounded in people's realities. Thank you very much. Muchas gracias.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. I think after the winter that Canadians have had, they're very interested in places like Santa Marta, increasingly. Thank you so much. And let me welcome Bastiaan Hassing. I see that you're here, and welcome. Glad you're here. Let me thank you very much, and let me turn now to Ambassador Vonno. The Netherlands is a co-host with Colombia of the Santa Marta Conference. Over to you, Ambassador.
Thank you, Ted. And my friend, Ambassador Morales, dear Carlos, it's so nice that we can do this together. You know that Colombia and the Kingdom of the Netherlands are neighbors, which are Caribbean parts of the kingdom. We do a lot together. Carlos and I work together on defense. Both our ministers of defense have met in Halifax. We do a lot on fighting organized crime, but this is my favorite, doing something to save the planet together. We are excited to be co-hosting and also excited that it's going to be in Colombia, not in the Netherlands. Even we are looking forward to going to that location. And I'm thrilled to say that our new Minister of Climate Policy and Green Growth, Madam Stientje van Veldhoven, will be co-hosting. She told me she's looking forward to doing that. She's been minister before, vice president of the World Resource Institute, and very capable and already in touch with her great other lady, Colombian minister. So because Carlos had a great speech with all kinds of details, I don't want to reiterate that, but tell you some personal stories. First and foremost, this is about saving the planet. And Carlos and I have been doing that in Rockcliffe Park, where both our residences are together, because it's been a harsh, harsh winter in Canada this year. And the flock of wild turkeys around us, who survived Thanksgiving, had trouble surviving the winter. Now, Carlos and his family had been on meetings back home for about a month, and I took over because his garden is the wildlife refuge for the flock of wild turkeys to recuperate before they explore the neighborhood. So I know it's personal with him and with me as well, and this is something on a more global level that we try to do our bit as well. Also, when I look at the Netherlands, maybe you know our images of the windmills that we have in the past, and I want to share this image with you, which is, I hope you can see it, a windmill painted by a veteran, a Canadian veteran who liberated the Netherlands. He's now 102 years old, Roland Lalonde, and he had gifted this to our embassy, and we have it hanging on the wall, and we love it. But the windmills in the Netherlands are mostly not like that anymore. We now have 2,600 windmill farms, especially offshore, but also on parts of our country. And that means that at this moment, already 60% of our electricity demand is based on wind energy, and we are striving for 75%. So we're not only coaliting on the willing, we're willing to take some action as well. And the same goes for solar panels. I don't know whether any of you here are online does have solar panels on his or her house. I've been very proud to be one of the innovators in 2010 in the Netherlands. together with my neighbors. That's a Dutch way that you try to work together, not only in fighting water, but also in finding new ways of finding energy. And we were quite impressed with ourselves at the time, but now we're just regular people and everybody has solar panels in our street. I think that it's part of a daily routine in the Netherlands, and I'm very proud of that because this is the way of transitioning. We also have a lot of laws and roadmaps and steps forward, but Bastiaan knows much better than me to explain that a little bit to you in the audience. I have to tell you that Bastiaan and I met when we both worked for the Minister for Climate in 2014. He was one of the best of the crew, so I told him, please go to the European Union and show what we can do. And I missed him terribly, and I'm really happy that we can reunite this way. And I think it goes for all of us. People who are in the coalition of the willing are not there for just 1 year. Once the climate bug has bitten you, you say, for my children, grandchildren, or whoever, I can't stop now. And Susan, you are one of the, I say it in a positive way, dinosaurs who will be alive forever and make us see the step forward. And I hope you and others can also find our esteemed Canadian colleagues to be there in Colombia, because we love fighting the good cause, not only with Colombia, but with Canada and with many other countries who are coming. And I'm very proud to do that. And it's also something where I find that there are so many people who are popping up that I hadn't even heard of. They said, oh, this is interesting. Our colleagues in Australia from the Dutch Embassy in Australia said, oh, we've seen that you do this webinar. We want to do something for us as well, because there will be an Australian delegation. Maybe we can find more content or interaction. And I find that telling for this topic and what a group of 78 has been organizing, it's spreading all over. There's freezing rain now in Ottawa. Luckily, we're online, but it's raining ideas and thoughts, and I'm very happy to be part of this group. So thank you for having me, Ted.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. Couple of things here. I'm looking in the chat, and one thing to note, you may know this already, that Senator Rosa Galvez, who was a ferocious climate warrior in Parliament and in public policy, will be at Santa Marta. So that's exciting. So Canada has one of our best people there. We want more. But that is a wonderful thing. And Senator Galvez, it's so great to have you on. I also have had in the chat, you can see a request for your remarks, both ambassadors. If you have notes for your remarks, we can make them available later. I hope that won't task your staff too much, but I think it's a great thing to have for people, and then there's interest. Let me ask you a couple of things, ambassadors. Number one, have you heard anything about Canadian participation at Santa Marta? And can you make any comment about what you'd like to see, or how countries should be represented at Santa Marta, both through governments and also through civil society and other organizations, perhaps businesses as well? Ambassador Morales, would you like to start on that question?
Thank you very much. Certainly, as that happens in that kind of forums, international forums, we have formally invited Canada to participate. And we know the commitment of Canada in energy transition. So since the information we have received through Global Affairs, that they are still, and also from the environment, is that they are still reviewing the invitation and looking at which level they are planning to participate. But of course, do you know, the invitation has been received openly, and of course, they are trying, I understand that internally they have to decide whether would be the right, delegation to participate in this conference in Santa Marta.
Thank you. Ambassador Vonno, any comment on that?
Well, around 100 countries have been invited to the conference, and RSVP is around 20th of March. We've already received a lot of replies, and I'm really happy that Commissioner for Climate of the European Union from Net Zero and Clean Growth, my former boss, Wopke Hoekstra, also Dutch, will participate. And other countries, I've heard from colleagues from Denmark, UK, Senegal, that they will be participating, and a lot is still coming in, Australia. So I'm really happy that it struck a chord with many countries.
Thank you. So we and others on this call, I'm sure, I know some of the participants to this call, will be pushing the Canadian government to be represented at a high level. We don't have as much leverage as some organizations, but we have a voice, and we'll use that voice. Let me ask you another question, perhaps a more complicated tactical question, and that is, for Santa Marta, how will you deal with the issue of representation by the fossil fuel industry itself? We know that they flooded the zone, as the Americans say, in a number of negotiations, including the COPs. How will the conference deal with that issue? And what are the plans?
Let me start, sorry. Maybe I think there will be representation from the private sector, as I mentioned in my first remarks, and also particularly from actors that they have expressed interest and commitment to advancing in the objectives of the transition away from fossil fuels. A specific selection, I think the process is currently undertaken to identify and invite a balanced group of private sector participants. And also, as mentioned, the NGOs, academia, workers' union, parliamentarians, and subnational governments. Furthermore, People's Assembly is expected to convene also in Santa Marta, and also other stakeholders that will take place to the high-level segment. And also they will try to identify enable pathways in order for a just, orderly, and equitable transition. So I think this is a very participative forum. We are planning to do that. And in general terms, this is a common endeavor for all sectors, not only public ones, but also international ones, but also from the people itself.
Thank you.
And Carlos, maybe I could like to add that we have the Beyond Oil and Gas Alliance, Coalition on Fossil Fuel Incentives and Subsidies, Powering Past Coal Alliance. We are partly part of that as the Netherlands as well, but that members of that are added on the list as well. So we've been very flexible in finding partnerships.
Wonderful.
Good.
Thank you, Ambassador.
I want to come to another question in a second, but we know that the Fossil Fuel Treaty Organization, was the Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty Group, will be involved, and Group of 78 is a member of that campaign organization. It's terrific. How will other activists and NGOs be invited or involved in the conference?
Do you know, Colombia is part of the several groups regarding, environment. For example, we are part of the High Ambition Coalition, which has played a role in keeping ambition high and driving the process toward meaningful outcomes. We also, High Ambition Coalition for Nature and People, this is promoting the global goal of protecting 30% for nature and people, and promoting global goal of protecting also our oceans by 2030. These coalitions have shown how coordinated action we need, because it's not only related to fossil fuels, but also, as I mentioned, in general terms of environment, climate change. For example, the conference of plastics that is taking place now. There are so many organizations in which Colombia is part, but also I know that not only Colombia, but also countries like Netherlands and also European countries, Asian and African countries. So the idea is to have a joint effort as a common endeavor in order to have a more clear and feasible results in Santa Marta's conference.
You. Ambassador Vonno?
Yeah, we are reaching out to the public with webinars and stuff like this, and spreading the gospel and finding people who are interested and are asking us for information. I think maybe the problem is that we have too many people who want to come, and you still have to organize it. But I'm looking forward to learning from the experts how that's being handled.
Okay, thank you. Just before we leave this segment, there's a question from one participant. Were we to encourage the Canadian government to participate and send a delegation? To which minister should we write? We have a couple of choices there, at least. The foreign minister, the environment minister, environment and climate change. Can you advise us on what the point of contact is on this initiative?
Well, I think the formal invitation has been sent to Minister Julianna, and
Okay.
I think that's the best way forward.
Yeah.
But I know that they're in close contact with the colleagues from Global Affairs Canada, GEC, as well, and they have
Indeed.
excellent collaboration.
Okay, but the Minister of the Environment is lead. That's good for us to know. Thank you so much. All right. Thank you, ambassadors. Well done. And as I said, there are requests for your notes. So if you can produce some material like that would be good, and we'll get the word out. And notes like that can become blogs very easily.
Yeah, that'll be okay, but only the picture I can share offline.
Okay, fair enough. All right, now let me turn to our expert speakers. And first is Laura Julianna Bastiaan. And we're again so glad you've been able to join us. We just talk briefly about what we'd like you to talk about, and I think you're aware of this. Your expert perspective on the policy and technical issues underlying the conference, how the conference will approach substantive issues of the transition away from fossil fuels, and what pathways to action will be created by the conference. And more specifically, if you could comment on the progress that you are expecting, hoping for, on the sub-issues of the conference three main themes: overcoming economic dependence on fossil fuels, transforming supply and demand, and increasing international cooperation. I will ask Bastiaan to comment on these things as well, but Laura, let's start with you if we could.
Sure, thank you, Ted, and hello to everyone. I'm very glad to be here also with Ambassador Morales, who has been a long-standing supporter of these causes in the negotiations of the Paris Agreement, the SDGs, among many others. So, before going to the specifics of the sub-themes and these thematic pillars of the conference and how we want to get to the results that we expect, I will also send you through the chat a briefing of our ministers, the Colombian and the Netherlands ministers, that was held last week, that has a lot more details on everything that you will hear today. Also, some more information of where you can reach out if you have any specific questions, because I'm reading the chat and there are many questions around participation and how can you engage directly in the process. So going to the substantive issues and perhaps connecting to some of the questions that you also raised in the chat on how are we going to measure the success and the whole outcomes of that we expect from the conference, I think Ambassador Carlos mentioned a few things. So we want first to have this coalition of committed countries coming to Santa Marta and identifying these specific solutions and enabling pathways, the barriers that we need to unlock to really advance in the transition away from fossil fuels. So we want to have at the end of the conference a report that captures these concrete proposals of how to move forward in the implementation of the transition away from fossil fuels around these three thematic pillars. And then also responding to another question of the process, as we know that this will be only a first moment, but that we won't be able to address this huge problem that we have, and which is interconnected with many other issues, the idea is that we, in Santa Marta, initiate the conversation around these specific topics with some identified pathways for action, but then the idea is for this dialogue focused on implementation to continue. And it will continue in a second conference that will be hosted by the Pacific Islands in the next year, but there will be also some key moments and milestones that we are still identifying that can keep the conversation moving forward. And of course, articulating and looking for coherence with the global conversation on the transition away from fossil fuels, with the conversation around the global roadmap that Brazil is leading this year, and that will be presented to the UNFCCC at COP31. So we are seeing how to better connect to different processes and in constant dialogue with the incoming presidencies of the COP, the current presidency, as well as with these other alliances and partnerships that the minister mentioned with BOGA, with COFIS, with the initiative of the treaty, bringing all of them together and seeing how, with the work that has been done under these different processes, we can add and we can connect different efforts to scale up our work and articulate it better and enhance our collective action and implementation. So for Santa Marta, having said that, we don't plan to solve everything, the idea is that we will start a process in which we will first gather written inputs. This is the stage one of the process, and we're currently under that stage. So all the participants who registered to the conference should have received already an invitation to submit written inputs around these three thematic pillars, and particularly identifying what are the current challenges and barriers and constraints that we are facing to overcome the economic dependency, to transform the supply and the demand of fossil fuels, and what are the challenges that we're also facing in terms of cooperation. With these first inputs that were sent not only to civil society and academics and experts and private sector, but also to governments, we will have a better basis to understand if those sub-themes that we have identified under each thematic pillar are correct, or if perhaps we need to focus more on one topic or another, and how are we going to frame the conversations in Santa Marta. So this will give us a better sense of where the conversation stands and how to really frame the conversation in a way that can be more useful for Santa Marta, understanding that this is really a broad conversation. The second part, the second stage of the process, is that there will be a sort of virtual dialogues for other participants, so civil society, academics, subnational governments, among others, that the broader group of participants that are that have confirmed their participation in the process. And they will have the opportunity, based on the written inputs, we will produce some summaries. And based on that, there will be a chance for these different stakeholders to discuss about the findings of these inputs that we gather. So we will be able to really confirm or see how we need to adjust this for the conversations in Santa Marta. So the idea of this whole process is to really start the conversation earlier, because the time in Santa Marta will be very short. So, but making sure that in Santa Marta we will have already some maturity in the level of the discussion and a better and more, let's say, concrete framing for the discussions. For the governments, there will be a retreat, an in-person retreat, in the 19th and the 20th of March in Paris. We are very excited because we have already more than, I think, 50 countries confirmed their participation in the retreat next week. And this will be a fair chance to start preparing in person with those delegates. This is not a ministerial event, it's more a heads of delegation and negotiators conversation to prepare for Santa Marta and discuss these three thematic pillars and what we can take as identified pathways and solutions for Santa Marta. So this is part of the preparatory process, and then we will arrive to Santa Marta, and as Ambassador Morales mentioned, we will have a first stage, from the 24th to the 27th, where the different stakeholders will be meeting, and then the high-level sessions, the 28th and the 29th. And these are organized separately, but the idea is that they will come together, and we will have representatives of the different groups of civil society, of academics, of subnational governments, parliamentaries, workers, to present the outcomes of their discussions that are all aligned with the three thematic pillars. So we will have these representatives from different groups presenting to the ministers in Santa Marta their views, their specific sectors' views around these issues, and everything will fit together into the final report that the conference will produce. And this will be the work that we have to do with the Netherlands on bringing together not only the results of the conversations in Santa Marta, but of the whole process, of the written inputs that we receive, of the virtual conversations that we will have, and then of the discussions that will take place in Santa Marta. So that's how the process will evolve. I think that we mentioned before what are the specific thematics and sub-themes that we have identified under each pillar. So on the reducing economic dependence on fossil fuels, we have identified so far that there are some pressing issues in there, including the fiscal dependence. How can we do an economic and labor reconversion that doesn't repeat past models of extractivism? And how can we address the shared responsibilities and commitments that we have in this reducing of the economic dependence? Then in terms of the transformation of the supply and the demand, we have issues such as source substitution. How can we redesign the energy matrix? How can we plan the phase down and the closure of fossil fuel extraction? So this is connected with conversations around environmental liabilities, the fair distribution of responsibilities and impacts, the cost, how do we manage the stranded assets, and of course the conversation around subsidies, which is very important for the whole discussion. And then, of course, the third thematic pillar on international cooperation and climate diplomacy will address what are the current gaps or challenges that we're facing in implementation, in cooperation, in governance, considering the existing spaces that we have in the multilateral system, but also these initiatives that are voluntary coalitions that are having every day a more important role in bringing together countries that are committed with the transition, also addressing these issues of how can we lift international legal barriers for the transition, and other proposals, including the one related to a fossil fuel treaty. So we will have the space to discuss all this in the broader stages in the different stages of the process. And part of what we expect of it is to really dive deeper into, okay, so if this is an issue that we all agree needs to be addressed, what are the main barriers that countries are facing, and what could be those high impact solutions or barriers that we need to remove. Perhaps I will just finish by saying that this will not be a negotiation session. This will be a conversation. We want to really engage ministers and other stakeholders in different formats than the usual COP formats that are very rigid. We want to have more informal dialogues and allow some space for thinking differently, more creatively, and starting a conversation that needs to continue after Santa Marta, but with a concrete output that will be this report, and hopefully a coalition of countries saying that they really want to continue these conversations and that they are willing to demonstrate their commitment and concrete actions to really move forward in their own national transitions, but also cooperating with other countries and stakeholders, as we know that we need to do this all together, not only governments, but we need the private sector, we need all different sectors of society for this huge challenge that we have in face. So I'll leave it here. Thank you.
Hey, thank you. Thank you so much. That's great, Laura, Juliana. By the way, to everyone online, you may see that Bastiaan has put in the chat the website URL for the conference. So there's a lot of information there. Please consult that if you're interested in the details of the conference after this webinar. So let me give a chance to Bastiaan Hassing. And again, thank you for coming from the minister's office to us today. And we're really delighted that you are with us. But if you could give your expert perspective from a policy and implementation and planning perspective for the conference, that would be very, very good. And we will get to questions in a moment. But over to you, Bastiaan.
Thank you very much for having me, and apologies for being late. I was indeed at a conference call between our two ministers, Minister Velas Torres and Minister van Veldhoven, on this very topic. I will keep it brief because there's very little that I can add to what has already been mentioned by Ambassadors Morales and Vonno. Margriet, it's wonderful to see you again and to connect on this topic that we worked previously on at a previous Ministry of Climate in the Netherlands. And again, Julianna has already mentioned a lot on what we're trying to achieve. I think I would just want to emphasize that something our spokesperson working on communications around this conference is always pushing me is to call this a working conference, right? We're not going to negotiate new targets. We're not going to negotiate a common declaration. We want to dive deeper in the specific of what it means to transition away from fossil fuels. And Ambassador Morales has already mentioned several ways in which Colombia is cleaning up its energy sector. And we want to talk about how did you do that? What did you learn in that process? Ambassador Vonno has mentioned what we're doing in the Netherlands, how the number of windmills that we use to produce wind energy now far exceeds the beautiful ones as painted by the Canadian veteran that she showed us. For us, I think we have learned from the mistakes from others. I'm not going to, it's not my intention to name and shame, but my Director General always points out the fact that when we wrote those tenders for those offshore wind parks, we learned from the mistakes from our colleagues in the UK. We now have more solar panels in the Netherlands than the entire continent of Africa has. Let that sink in. I mean, that's first of all an indication of untapped potential that we need to tap into, and we need to help Africa make that transition and use that potential. But it's also leading now in the Netherlands to a congestion on the grid that that transition to more renewable energy leads to so much trouble that we can't connect businesses and companies fast enough to make use of that renewable energy. And I think those are the kinds of discussions that we're looking to have in Santa Marta, to learn from each other, to see how we can better collaborate internationally, and see how those, well, almost 100 countries that we have invited can make a real impact and speed up that transition that inevitably will take a lot of time.
Okay, thank you so much. Well, there are lots of questions, certainly lots of questions from us as well. And I see again, Julianna's posted the briefing from last week that will give even more details, I guess, about the conference and the issues. But let me ask you both to comment on a number of things, and perhaps the ambassadors could weigh in on this as well. To go back to something Ambassador Morales said of the, put it in my words, tactics that are used by corporate power to avoid or undermine climate objectives of governments. How will I guess it would be under Pillar 1, perhaps. Concretely, are you seeing proposals coming in now for legal work that the ambassador referred to on responses, tactical responses, legal responses to, or political responses to remove some of the tactical room that companies use to undermine climate objectives? I think that's kind of a clear question. Julianna, would you like to say something about this, and also Bastiaan?
Thank you. I think this is related to another question I was just seeing in the chat. So we are, as Bastiaan mentioned, and the ambassadors as well, we have framed this conference as a conference for those who are convinced of the need to transition away from fossil fuels. And in that case, we're taking different measures to make sure that those who come to the process are really supporting the process and are really going to contribute in the direction that we want to see. Of course, knowing that there are different actors and stakeholders that have to do and are important for the conversation, but for the purposes of this conference, that we want to make sure that we are aligned in the principles of ambition and commitment with the transition away from fossil fuels. There have been different measures, I would say. The first one is that the countries that were invited are the countries that have demonstrated commitment with the transition. And most of these are countries that are part of different coalitions or different alliances, or have demonstrated at the national level that they have policies in place to phase down fossil fuels. That's one of the first measures I would say have been taken. The second one relates to the registration process. There has been an open invitation, but there is a screening process supported by different organizations, including from the UN, to really revise all these issues related to conflicts of interest. So we can make sure that those that provide inputs and also engage in the different phases and stages of the conference are the ones that are aligned with their principles. And this is why I think, we will have like a more controlled, or hopefully, a better mapping of those who are coming and their commonalities and principles aligned with the conference. But I don't know, Bastiaan, if you'd like to complement that.
Well, thanks, Julie. I think this is a very good explanation of what we're trying to achieve. I think we are very well aware of the fact that, as Ambassador Morales has said, as Margriet has said, and Julianna as well, that in the end, we need all actors to transition away from fossil fuels. But we want to start by countries that have shown their commitment. We see year after year at the climate COPs that we don't manage to take next steps in agreeing on language on how to transition away from fossil fuels. So we thought we start with those countries that are already convinced that we need to. So we don't have to negotiate, but we rather hope to demonstrate that by coming together and identifying barriers, but also sharing best practices and successes, as several ones of the ones that both ambassadors have highlighted, that hopefully by a next conference, the group will grow. Because this will also show potential for new economic business models.
I want to ask all of you, including the ambassadors, this is what we would call a plurilateral initiative. It's a coalition of the willing, as a number of you have said, and we're getting that the importance of that in Canada now. And our Prime Minister has referred to a rupture in the world order and the need for coalitions or alliances of specific purpose to be developed. And this is in a number of fields, as you know, including defense and trade. But is there, Julianna and Bastiaan, you're in the machinery of this conference, and ambassadors, you are working with the politics and diplomacy of this conference. Is there something different about pushing, promoting a plurilateral initiative than there is in other ways of working? Are you learning some things already about how to do this in a way that all of us should learn about? Because this is a new world and it needs more of this, not less of this. I open the floor to a number of you, all of you.
Well, Ted, I'd like to start. I know that my colleague Carlos unfortunately had to leave, but we're all having lots of engagements as ambassadors. And he was very sorry that he couldn't be there, but we are sort of like a married couple. We are neighbors and we work well together. So I sort of dare to speak on behalf of him as well. I know he will allow me. What I find is this is something which gives a bonus, because it's either I worked at the UN, I worked at the European Union, or it's bilateral or within the EU framework. But this is a sort of coalition of the willing, and I find it also an example to the rest of the world, because Colombia and the Netherlands are very different countries. If you don't know them, if you become friends, you say that the main difference is that Colombians are much better dancers than the Dutch, but otherwise we like soccer and we have a lot in common. And now we find that we have, from our different networks, something to add to all of us, but there's also some easygoing way of collaborating, which I have with Carlos, but I see Julianna and Bastiaan sharing the same kind of, we're on the same page, same team, but still we are, different in a good way. And I find that that's the way forward, to really have a coalition of the willing. And we are both open to conversation, to debate in a good way. But we don't want that to play games and to, break stuff, because that's so much easier than to build stuff. And what I find that this is so inspiring, that a lot of people that we discuss it with say, oh, can we do something like this? Or maybe we should be there. And it's not just on the very important topic for finding alternatives to fossil fuels, but it's also because people, especially in those global well, interesting times that we are living through now, people need hope and something positive. And I think that we're offering that. And if I look at myself, this has been my most energizing part of the day because of the topic and because of what I feel, what we're doing with this team. So that's my take on it, Ted.
Very good. Thank you so much. Anyone else? Julianna, how is it
Yes.
working inside the machine?
Intense.
Yeah, I bet.
But other than that, I think we're learning by doing a lot, because this is a different context, a different format of work. It's in a way an experiment as well, and we want to invite others to help us thinking and help us building this, because definitely in reading to the chat, we don't have all the answers. We are going through a very difficult political, economic, and geopolitical moment. The year started very differently. It's not that 2025 ended very positively, but 2026 also surprised us with other things, and definitely all connected to the discussions that we're going to have. So it's not, in a way, the idea is not to isolate from these other challenges, but it's, as the ambassador said, like, okay, let's try to think on this particular issue. How can we do something differently? And it's not something like that is in contrast to other efforts, but is additional and is complementary. So I think that's also something that we've been trying to say a lot. It's not this or that, it's this and that. And we will try to explore how to, I think that the countries that come will give us a good signal of who is actually really interested in working on this. Now, of course, the participating nations will send a signal by coming, but of course this is not a formal process of the United Nations, or no, it's not a conference that has been planned for a long time. No, it's been also challenging because of the short time that we have had for preparations. But I think that, the invitation is for those both from governments and civil society who want to try something differently, and know in advance that it will not be perfect, it will not cover everything, but it will be an honest attempt to contribute to a global conversation on the transition away from fossil fuels. Is very welcome to come and support us. Thank you.
Thank you. Bastiaan, anything to add?
I'm dreading it now, because after Margriet's message of trying to instill hope in this difficult discussion, and after Julianna's wonderful characterization of what we're trying to do, I guess I will just add to that while those UNFCCC, the UN climate negotiations definitely serve a purpose and have brought us a lot. I think before the agreement of the Paris Accord, global temperature rise was predicted to exceed 4 degrees. We're now down to 2.5, which is still too much. There's still a lot of work to be done, but that definitely has served a purpose. In addition to that, it's actually how Julian and I met. We've met about 6 years ago, I think. And this way of working isn't necessarily completely new. There's something called the Cartagena Dialogue, which is a cooperation of countries that are very different culturally, economically, in many different ways. I'm not even going to try and pretend that I'll ever come close to being able to dance like Julianna can, but we have worked together very well in the last couple of years, and through the Cartagena dialogue and through many of the initiatives that several of you have already mentioned, we will continue to do so and build on what has been done already.
Thank you. I'm not going to comment on my own dance capacity either. Although we have grandchildren and we kind of inflict some dancing, really bad dancing on, and they have survived. It makes them better people. All right. So patiently waiting in the wings here has been my dear colleague Susan Tanner, who is, as we've said, one of Canada's champions on the environment, on climate change, and also on human rights and women's rights. And she has been involved in international negotiations as well as a great deal of leading many Canadian initiatives. So, Susan, you've heard our colleagues talk about this. I'm finding it very inspiring, but obviously there's a lot of work that needs to happen to make Santa Marta a success, and this work is going on. And Canada has to look at itself to see where we want to go and what we want to do, not only around the conference, but around our own transition. And we are a petrostate too, although a very polite one. So let us turn to you, Susan, and get your sense of what you've heard and what you think this process needs to pay attention to, and also what Canada should do, not only about the conference, but about the transition. Over to you. And you need to unmute.
Well, thank you, Ted. There are some problems with coming last, of course, because then you want to change everything you were going to say in the first place.
Sorry about that.
I wanted to start anyway by thanking the Colombian and Netherlands governments for co-hosting this. I think the very existence of the meeting creates hope.
Yeah.
It certainly did for me. That it is happening, that there are people who are serious about it, and they're going ahead and providing information that all the countries are going to need at one point or another. Climate change is not going to magically disappear, and people will need that information. It's very important information, and I think there is a chance it will speed things up, which would be great. I watched the official launch, although I didn't get all the Spanish questions. But anyway, I watched the launch and it was excellent. And what I saw there was determination, excellent organization. I do not have a lot to suggest in terms of the organization. It's a huge job. You were involving many more people than were involved at the Montreal Protocol. In fact, you are juggling so many different stakeholders that it is. I'm surprised you can keep it. I can't keep it in my own mind. So determination, excellent organization with a whiff of excellent music. You just crept in along the edges. And I think that is also a fabulous. It's necessary. It's necessary that we don't just hang around being depressed, that we celebrate what we have to celebrate. We are getting together. We are going to make a difference. I think it's really going to be an excellent meeting. Like the Montreal Protocol, you have all the key factors, a consensus among participations based on agreed scientific expertise, providing channels to involve a very wide participation, which I'm sure will provide a great deal of insight and practical information, and arranging for funding and expertise to be available to those projects, which I think is wonderful and necessary, very important. And having another meeting, a series of meetings. And the one thing I would say in relation to the Montreal Protocol is that a series of meetings are absolutely necessary. There is so much. You've got so many people that you have to hear. It's going to take a long time in this meeting. You're not going to be able to get down to, well, maybe you will. You may not be able to get down to some of the nitty-gritty that you want to. And I think it will be really important to have a series of meetings which will accumulate the expertise and the development of relationships of trust, which I see on this screen right now, which is wonderful and what makes it really hopeful. So I only wish I were able to attend and dance to that music. So it's great. I was also asked by Ted to talk a bit about Canada, and this is a difficult one because environmentalists all over Canada are disappointed with what has happened so far under our current Prime Minister, that we thought would be acting more decisively on fossil fuels. So at the moment, he has lots of interesting projects about electrification, grids and solar and cars from China, but that does not balance out the fossil fuel projects, which he's also developing. And we all worry, those of us who actually believe the science worry that he's playing a game where we may be trying to strengthen our economy and sort of made a deal with the devil here. The only thing I can add to the discussion, which I probably shouldn't say, but the relationship of Canada with the United States is not only losing a great partner or your biggest partner. It is actually more, we are so integrally involved, we're so intimately involved that it's more like a divorce with a difficult husband, very difficult, unpredictable, sometimes abusive husband. And those situations, I know any of the women here will understand, probably quite a few of the men, that this does not lead always to logical solutions. And while we have our elbows up, there's clearly some trade-offs being made. And yet, we know, Carney wrote a book on values. He knows the science. I think he still could be perhaps convinced to go. Julie Duberson, she's really interested in plastics. She's given some speeches on it. I don't know. I know she would be interested. I don't know whether that will be on the priority list at the federal level. And I think dealing somehow with the Prime Minister's office will be essential. And in fact, I'd like to take this opportunity to ask for help. I mean, the Group of 78 will definitely be advocating on this, as we have been for years, getting off fossil fuels. And we will advocate, of course, that they attend, at least contribute to the project, which is going to provide all this important information. But I think it would be much easier if we had in Canada more of an interdisciplinary group that made those calls. And if rather than giving you information, I'd like to hear in the chat the different ways that you think we could involve Canada more. And in doing so, you will have ways of helping other countries to make their petrostate politicians pay attention and perhaps participate. So I think that's another positive way we can use our chat. And the wonderful people, I know we've got excellent people on this call who would have a lot to contribute to that conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Yeah, Canada has to deal with the United States in some way. And we are going to be promoting the transition, and we continue to do it. So I just say to participants that are online, Susan has made an invitation, a request for your ideas. We do know some of you and that you are working in this field and doing very innovative and passionate work. So we're definitely open to hear your ideas. I want to turn to all of you, though, for questions that are more about economics, but the social dimensions of economics as well as economics per se. You may have seen Senator Galvez's contribution in the chat, and one of the things she has raised, which I think is implicit in almost everything everyone has said, is the importance of demonstrating the economic benefits of the transition, at whatever level that is, at the level of businesses, at the level of jobs, the level of country efficiencies on energy expenditure, etc. I wonder if you could just say what the conference is going to be doing on this. I suppose all three of the thematic areas in some way may deal with this, but perhaps it's the first one and the second one of the themes, and just generally how you see that issue. Maybe start with Ambassador Vonno on this.
Thank you very much, Ted. And yes, this is indeed a very important element. It's one of the reasons why I got into climate policy, to be honest. We all know that we need to reduce our carbon emissions because, well, as Margriet has mentioned as well, to save the planet. That said, that transition, and that I think goes for any big change movements, will also bring with it opportunities. I was particularly struck last year, I think, when I was in Paris at an OECD meeting, where both the OECD itself, then Environment Director Joe Tyndall, which has been succeeded by our former climate envoy, Jaime de Bourbon, presented findings on the OECD's many studies and big pile of data, that if we do this right, if we do this transition right from a fossil-based system to a renewable-based system, then global GDP will grow. And that message was repeated by Lord Adair Turner immediately after from the Energy Transition Commission, who basically had independently from the OECD found the same to be true. Now, the difficult bit about this, of course, is that all of our economies are interlinked. This is a globalized economy. Susan mentioned the difficulty going through a divorce from some of our partners who we've relied on for a very long time. We have seen shocks to the system during the COVID pandemic, and now again with the conflict in the Middle East. Having said that, the dependence on fossil fuels is something we can change. We can move towards systems where we generate our own electricity. I think we can also become stronger there if we create interlinkages, especially in certain regions that will remain dependent on their neighbors. But it's a very difficult topic, and it's incredibly difficult to manage both the social and economic aspects. So we've been overwhelmed by support and offers of help and data, which we're, as Julianna explained, are going through and seeing how we can give those voices a role at the conference. We're not going to magically present the solution after 2 days, but hopefully we walk away from this conference also knowing that in that big pile of data, there is a positive message.
Mhm. Thank you. Julianna?
No, I think Bastiaan said the main thing. I think that in the conversation, issues like trade will come naturally because it is really connected to the crisis that we're living, energy dependence, no security. It's all will naturally come, I think, as part of the conversations. But indeed, and I think somebody wrote it also in the chat, like this challenge that we have to see the middle and long-term benefits, cost benefits, no, of the transition away from fossil fuels continues to be very important. I remember that in 2014, I think, there was this report of the new climate economy that started already flagging many of these messages. And now we have even better information and better data supporting this. So I think one of the opportunities that we will have in Santa Marta and beyond after Santa Marta and during this whole process is to bring together the latest information, the latest data, to support precisely these points that can help identify the opportunities, but not only opportunities that seem like very far. Like in an ideal world, we should go that way because we know there are many pressing challenges of development, of poverty, labor, employment that needs to be addressed urgently by countries, particularly developing countries. But if we start to precisely identify those more concrete solutions also in the short term that could lead us and leverage those scenarios for the future, that it would be like really, really an amazing result of our conversations. Thank you.
Thank you. Ambassador, would you like to weigh in on this?
Yeah, I'm excited. Actually, this is a webinar where I'm not sort of bored after an hour. So congratulations to you, because I've been on a lot of webinars. I'm actually more excited. I've done an MBA myself, and I've done a lot with business. And what I learned that the innovators are the ones reaping the profits. And I think we are mostly here because we want to sort of save the planet and are really emotionally involved. But I think it's also a good business proposal to start looking into those new directions, because the fossil fuels are already there. My daughter would say they're gone. It's really, maybe it will take some time, but we are looking into the future. And if you prepare for that, it will be beneficial in economic term. And I'm happy that it's us doing that, because I think we will also look out for the public in general and not just have one or two companies reap the profits as well. And I think that's something that we should add in the process. Thanks, Ted.
Thank you so much. I see that somebody has come back with, this is a different matter, but we have a bit of time. Back to the experience of the Montreal Protocol negotiations. Susan, was there anything else you wanted to say about the experience, the tactics that you used, apart from the dancing idea, which is still very good, but any other observations on how that experience evolved and why it was so successful?
Well, some of the reasons it was so successful were that the industry was involved, was signed up to do the change. They felt they could make profits on the alternatives as well, and while they're getting rid of the difficult gases, and they were actually participating positively. So as we've already discussed, I think that is a serious problem. I also think that the trade regime, which we've evolved, unfortunately, based on greed. the trade regime puts profit above everything. When we had our agreement with Mexico, United States, and Canada, our environmental agreement and our trade agreement, the environment and social issues were not even really considered. They were secondary. There were little committee meetings about them, but they were secondary. The important thing was the trade. And you can see in most trade contracts since then that profit is the be-all and the end-all, and nothing else is a factor. And when we're talking about the environment, that's a completely opposite way around. And I don't know exactly how we get at that attitude, but it's really a serious problem worldwide. Another reason that the Montreal Protocol got some progress is that the states were all equal, considered equal. Even if they were asking for money for a particular project because they didn't have enough money, they all had an equal vote and they were treated respectfully and they were all equals. And I think you're definitely starting with that now with what you're doing. So I think that's excellent. The NGOs did come up with ideas that were considered. And it looks like you are going to be creating that as well. I don't know if you've got, it sounds like you may already have energy cooperatives, and having been vice chair of the Ottawa Renewable Energy Co-op, I think that that kind of action hits a lot of the dots on your list of what you would like to do. And so I think that would be great. But I think that there was a sincere discussion, and Canada and Australia were collaborating. They were given one table with 2 chairs. And so they had to collaborate very closely on that. And there was a lot of trust, both between the NGOs and the official representatives. And I hope you can maintain that, because I think that really makes a difference to the product. And in our case, representing Friends of the Earth, we had a partner with an East Indian NGO. And we made sure that anything we were recommending was applicable to both the North and the South. So we were speaking not as separate or competing information. I don't know, off the top, I haven't thought of anything else that might operate.
Okay, but that's very helpful. And this conference is inspiring. It's exciting. We salute the Netherlands. We salute Colombia. We salute everybody who's involved in pushing this forward, and we will do our best to promote it as well. I want to thank all of you. We're going to have to wind up now, but it's been a wonderful discussion. There's lots of material in the chat, so what we will do is try to scoop that material up. Thank you for those links and those suggestions, and when the recording's ready, we'll try to aggregate those resources as well, so that people have it available to them. But very inspiring. We will be very excited to hear the results of what you're working on. And we thank you so much for being part of this today. It's been a real privilege. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.